This conference will now be recorded.
No.
All right, I think we can get started. We're hitting a quorum. All right, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Jordan C. I'm part of Meta, but also wearing a different hat for this call. I've been helping to chair this substream, if you will, on the Sustainability and Circularity Strategic Initiative. So throughout 2021, a group of us have been working to scope out kind of what OCP could do in the realm of sustainability and circularity. There's obviously a lot. So we started off, focusing in on first off metrics and relatedly life cycle assessment type metrics. There's another substream that's focusing on circularity efforts. And then we all come together in a monthly call, which if you're not on it, I do recommend you join at 10 a.m. Actually, today's 10 a.m. call will be particularly insightful. We're actually going to be doing some 2022 brainstorming. So if you're able to join, please do. If you don't have that meeting invite, do reach out and I can help share. Before we jump into the agenda for today, wanted to just leave some space for any introductions of new folks that have joined the call for the first time. If you can introduce yourself, the company or organization you're representing, and kind of why you're interested in joining this call. So I'll just open it up. If you can just unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I know some of you. I'm Cosimo Pecchioli. I'm with Alfa Laval. Christy and I are part of the same company, and we are very active in other groups of the OCP. And we are about to start a new working stream, which is heat reuse for data centers. And so it really, let's say, it's aligned with sustainability and circular economy very well. So I think I will try to join these calls as much as I can from now on.
I'll go next. My name is, oh, sorry. I think you're on mute too, Christy, but my name is Andrea Desimoni. I'm with Schneider Electric. I'm our sustainability solutions architect in our cloud and service provider team. And I'm interested in this particular topic because I'm helping large data center customers approach supply chain sustainability. So thanks.
All right, to keep on the Schneider theme, Rob Bunger. I'm here because of um, Don Mitchell, who I don't see on this call to give him a hard time. But anyways, so I've been involved with Open Compute, different roles actually in the data center facility for a number of years. So I'm familiar with the work groups. It's great to see the sustainability work group. I'm in the CTO office at Schneider. And we have Andrea introduced herself. We also have Anna Timmy, who she's still on the call. I'm looking. Who actually leads. Oh, okay. Anyways, Anna, she leads our sustainability for our division, all our activities at Schneider. And then Alex here is on her team, and I'll let Alex introduce himself.
Yeah, not much to add there, but partners with Andrea working on sustainability for data center customers, and a colleague of Rob as well.
Hi, I'm Jack Kohler. I'm with TAS in Houston, and our work in immersion kind of leads me to this group. We're also trying to work with some other clients who are also trying to do some special things with heat reuse from the immersion products. So we're tangentially involved. You never know when our paths will cross.
And hi, I'm Christy Smith. Cosmo already introduced me, but just want to say hello to everybody. And we're definitely interested in helping with this sustainability project. So thank you for inviting us.
And by the way, Jordan, I do not have the invitation for the call at 10. If you could put it in the chat box or somewhere, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
I'll go. I'm Chris Ray with Apto Solutions. We're an IT asset disposition partner, and we've been for the past 2 years working on a circular innovation project where anything that goes end of life, we're tracking it where it comes back into the supply chain. So we've been working with our customers and providing that kind of reporting. And the next step with us is actually getting carbon credits for that process.
Great. Anyone else want to introduce themselves? I think that might cover all the newer faces. Great. So I'll just very briefly summarize the previous meeting before we go into the agenda. So in the previous meeting, it was a smaller group of us. I think it was right after the US Thanksgiving holiday. We revisited kind of what the workstream scope was. We had some really good feedback around, wanting to include more metrics in the scope of what we were discussing around how to reduce power consumption, and that led into an interesting discussion on influencing silicon design. So it was a really good piece of feedback. A lot of what we've been working on as well is helping to define some of the metrics that could be used to demonstrate how a contribution is either meeting or not meeting sustainability, in the hopes of sustainability becoming a fifth tenet within OCP, alongside things like scalability, efficiency, openness. There's a couple of other tenets that are slipping my mind right now. So that's the ultimate goal. So it was a really good piece of feedback. And with that, I'm happy to jump into the first meeting agenda topic, which is, Rob, I'd love to hand it over to you. Really appreciate Don, who's not here, sharing the great white paper that came out of Schneider Electric. And I think that the group here will find a lot of value in what your team put together. So with that, I'll hand it off to you.
Cool. Okay. Can you give me rights to share, or maybe Michael?
I can do that.
Can. All right. Awesome. Let's try that. All right. Who's ready for PowerPoint?
Yay! Finally.
All right.
Finally,
I'm not going to go.
finally some PowerPoint.
Yay.
So just to give you a background on this, geez, the paper, the way it works in Schneider, the different ideas on either thought leadership or research and stuff happens. And this had been on the list and got kicked off last year, and I kind of joined it in the middle. So the stuff that came out of this, I can't take credit for having the knowledge of being able to bring this. In fact, I would say that I was sort of on my sustainability journey as I supported the creation of the white paper. We had luckily had a lot of people smarter than me contribute to it. So I'll jump through the fluffy stuff here and get into if you haven't looked at the paper. So basically, when I first looked at all the potential metrics that are available to to measure the sustainability of a data center, and you look at all the frameworks that are out there, especially as you look at carbon, I mean, it's crazy. There's a ton of stuff out there. And even at the data center, there's just been a lot of stuff suggested. I mean, almost anything's possible. So we kind of step back and say, okay, first, what do we think it might be the most important areas of impact that we would want to measure? And so we came up with these 5. So energy, of course, because that's what data centers do, is use energy. Of course, greenhouse gas emissions, Water for a while has been an issue, but I think over the past several years it's really come to a high level of attention. Waste is not talked about too much, but you definitely see it more and more, and again with some of the circular economy things that are happening now in the industry, it's luckily getting the right type of visibility. And then the last one, which is more of an emerging area, is land and biodiversity. So we kind of categorized all the metrics into these 5 areas of impact, or 5 categories. And we also sliced them another way, and we said, hey, not everybody is as advanced as some of the hyperscale data center folks who can measure everything and are really good at it. If I'm just starting it, what should I start measuring? And so we make recommendations on the metrics. So beginning, advanced, and leading. And this beginning, advanced, leading actually came from we borrowed this just language from another journey to net zero, to be honest. So, and said, hey, it's probably a good framework to say company can evaluate what they're able to do and make strides to measure more and more things as they are able to. So this was pretty important for us to look at the, I wouldn't say thousands, but hundreds of possibilities of things that you could measure and say, well, should we measure it and should we report on it? So these are the criteria. And when I did a talk yesterday, I kind of relate them to, SMART goals, SMART. If you're going to make a goal, make sure it's a SMART goal. So this is like, how do you make a good metric? Right, it's important to data centers because there's a lot of sustainability stuff out there that applies to a general office building or maybe a mining, a mining site, which may or may not make sense for the data center. So, is it relevant to the data center? Does it actually have an impact on the environment directly or indirectly? And can you implement it? This is a big one. I think you guys have seen a lot of different stuff you can measure that. It'd be great if we could measure it, but we just can't get the data. You can only get it once in a while. Also has to be communicated within your organization so you can report things up. And that leads to the benchmarking and making action plans to actually make changes and drive the metrics in the correct direction. The other thing we thought was important that it could apply to all geographies too and be standardized. So the metrics can be applied everywhere, we believe. The targets might be different, though, based upon where you are and potentially the goal of the data center. So I'll start here, and I'm not going to go through all these slides, but in the energy category or area of impact, we have 5 metrics. And the slides are showing up correctly, right? Just make sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they
are.
You
guys see
Yes.
Okay, cool. So total energy consumption, PUE, of course, we can never leave out PUE. Total renewable energy consumption, renewable energy factor, REF, and then energy reuse factor, COSIMO, that's for you guys in your new work group. And you'll notice that the metrics are a key of just a straight up number, like, hey, how much energy am I using, to a ratio. And you'll see that theme throughout because ratios are great because now you can start, comparing improvement across different load levels of your data center and comparing against other data centers within your portfolio or comparing against the marketplace and what the industry is doing, right? So that's what's great about things like PUE, energy renewable factor, and ERF, and you'll see the other ones. These old, green grid, if you're not aware, these green grid metrics that you see, especially all these ratios, have been turned over to ISO IEC. So they're actually ISO IEC standards that have, you can get the document. It's not expensive. It's like 25 Swiss francs or whatever they are. And you can, it tells you exactly how to measure it. And each one, it's not just a straight number. Some of them you'll find that there's different levels within each metric. But in any event, there's a standard that does that. So it's nothing that we have to reinvent the wheel on. And you can see that the last two, we would expect that if you're beginning your sustainability journey, you can measure, if you're not already, you should be able to measure total energy consumption. I would say majority of data centers all doing PUE. And then being able to get the total renewable energy should be easy. Even if you're saying I'm a small data center just connected to the grid, just purchasing right off my local grid, the grid's going to be able to give you the mix of renewable energy in your grid, and you could report on that. So that's the stuff in the energy category, which is reasonably straightforward.
Hey Rob, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is really great. I'm guessing that obviously this white paper and the metrics here were developed with the with the idea in mind that like the primary user of this document would be a data center operator. Is that right? I'm just thinking through.
Yeah.
You know, the OCP community is obviously made up of many different actors within the value chain, and if someone were to pick this up, maybe they're, you know, upstream in the supply chain, how would this grid or matrix look different? Or, you know, obviously some of the technologies that folks are building do impact these metrics. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so if you know, so this is you know, I run a data center. What should I measure? Now, you'll if you looked at it, you'll obviously notice it that it's kind of a arm's length distance from the we'll call the sustainability of the IT equipment, and it's, but you know, we can talk about that also. But we do get to a part where we get to the greenhouse gas issue, where we get to scope 3 emissions. And so if you're a supplier of goods or services to the data center industry, then there's going to be specific areas of these metrics that you're like, okay, I know my customer, the data center operator, is concerned about these, and then, you know, am I showing them my, you know, the emissions of my products as they implement them in their data center? Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm not going to go through all these. I'll just skip to the next. All right. So in the greenhouse gas emissions section, there's a lot. And so let's see. I don't know. Can you guys see my, here, I'll do the
yes, the
cursor.
pointer. Yes, we can see the pointer.
Use the laser one. Ah, there we go. So starting off with kind of just straight up numbers, and then you'll see the ratios as we go down. Greenhouse gas emissions and scope 1. So this is the stuff, right, that's, you know, we cover scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is the stuff that you emit on site. And so the common ones are, you know, diesel generator when it's running. You know, if you have, you know, SF6, which is a gas that's in the medium voltage switchgear, or it could be HFCs or refrigerants, right? Any of those leak on site, or cars that employees use on site. So all the stuff from on site, any generation that you have on site, if you're doing cogeneration. So that's scope 1 emissions. There's location-based emissions, and this is from purchased energy, which could be electricity, it could be steam, heat, you know, chilled water, if you purchase that and it's imported to the data center. So that is scope 2, and location based would be, you know, the best analogy is like, hey, what I'm getting from my local grid, connected grid within a geographic area. Market based, same things, you know, scope 2, but if you're purchasing electricity from a certain source from on the market, then that would be called market based greenhouse emissions. And that could be, you know, you could be purchasing renewable energy through a PPA, and that would fall into that bucket. And then here's the last one, is greenhouse gas emissions scope 3. And this is embedded carbon, any goods or services. If, you know, employees are going on a business trip and they fly somewhere, it's the carbon from the airline, all that stuff. And that's what you can see. We put that in leading because this data is not super available now, although the industry, and, you know, I know at Schneider, we're working super hard to make sure that there's full transparency in all the products that we have. So that's scope 3. And as you get down, it's we're getting into the intensity. So there's location-based carbon intensity and market-based carbon intensity. You can just, you know, and that's kind of slicing it so you can kind of look at them both. But in general, carbon intensity would be the amount of emitted carbon, scope 1 and 2, and whether the scope 2 is location or market-based, and that ratio to your total energy use. So if I'm a 20 megawatt data center that's burning 20 megawatt, how much megatons of CO2 equivalent do I have on that? And again, that allows you to start comparing yourself against other data centers and even against other industries, for that matter. And then carbon usage effectiveness, and that's one of those green grid metrics that made it over to ISO. So it's similar, but it's your carbon emitted, but in a ratio to your IT load. And so it doesn't matter how efficient you are, what your PUE is, it relates it to your IT load. And the last two here, carbon offsets. And so those are used by a lot of folks when you have emissions that you just can't get rid of. And there's a lot of those right now. Offsets are used to kind of compensate for those. So, and offsets aren't all bad. They do provide funding to build more renewables and things like that, and sometimes carbon capture. But in any event, there are legitimate ways, or let's say above board ways to leverage offsets when you can't be fully green. Now, the last one is something that hyperscalers have been looking to do, and folks like Google and Microsoft, where they're trying to match the supply and the consumption real time, hour by hour. So, if the sun's shining and the wind's blowing or what have you, and this starts bringing in energy storage to go through the lumps, so they don't actually have to rely on carbon-based energy. Pretty advanced topic. There's not a standardized way yet to measure that, but we wanted to get it on the list because it's things that people are starting to do, and it's a good thing. All right, so it's greenhouse gas emissions. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. This is Francis here. I just want to ask one question about where you classified Scope 3 emissions into the leading. Understanding that Scope 3 is a very broad category, and there's a lot of different ways to calculate Scope 3 and kind of increasing accuracy. I don't know, when you were developing this, you had any thought about like having certain aspects of Scope 3 or less accurate approaches be included in advanced versus leading, or I'd just love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So yeah, I think we put it in leading just because solid data is not readily available to everybody, right? And on all products. And there is definitely some estimations happening. And in fact, we're doing it now and say, okay, this category of product in general, if it's coming from this region, is going to have about this amount of embodied carbon. That's a good point. And that could, to have a nuance saying there's an estimate. That's a good comment.
Yeah, because like maybe EEIO Scope 3 emissions is in advanced, and then you move to more accuracy in leading, or just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is great discussion, and I'm glad Andrea from Schneider's on, because she's more knowledgeable and understands this aspect more. So I don't know. Hopefully, Andrea, you're capturing these thoughts.
I am. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Cool. There was, I think, another voice in there before we move on.
Yes. Hi, Rob. This is DJ. So among all of these greenhouse gas emission key metrics, which would you say is the most commonly used among data center operators to report out greenhouse gas emission?
I would say probably, I would say the top three. Again, they're pretty readily available. Everything that we have here, and then making the ratio isn't difficult because it's just over your total power. So definitely in the beginning. I don't know if people are using like CUE much yet, to be honest, but I think total emissions and megaton of CO2 equivalent and the intensity is pretty. And you bring up a good point, reporting, and that's something that's all over the place. Who do you report to? Does it get audited? That's still kind of a gray area. There's definitely, the white paper kind of touches on some of the organizations of which you can report your carbon emissions to, and there's no data center specific organization right now. But again, this our hope in this paper is kind of get things rolling in this world.
Right. No, I think this is, at least for me, very educational. So thank you for sharing this, Rob. And one quick follow-up question. Do you think that there are possibilities of double counting, which I have heard from some of the experts when they talk about scope 1, 2, and 3? Does that happen to be a possibility in this particular scenario?
Yeah. So as I was learning this, and getting my head wrapped around scope 1, 2, and 3, and I'm like, wait, so Schneider's scope 3 is our downstream scope 3 is another company's upstream scope 3, and it is not that straightforward. So I think if we were to gather everybody's scopes together and report up as a company, you can't just add them all together and say that's the total, because there is definitely overlap, right, between upstream and downstream carbon, right? So the carbon that we emit making products becomes another company's scope 3 carbon from a purchase perspective.
Exactly. And that has impact in the reduction side, because somebody reduces that actually percolates through the supply chain, and it reduces everybody's scope in some sense, depending on where that player is in the supply. Thank you, Rob. For
yeah. Sure. Yeah. Good. All right. No more questions. I'll move on. All right. I'm taking up too much of my time here.
No, you take up as much time as you need, Rob. Thanks.
All right. Sorry, you guys aren't getting the fancy graphics. You're just getting the tables. So, because you guys, I could tell you're just data people. All right. So water, definitely in the headlines a lot, right? It feels like, at least once or twice a month, there's some headline from a newspaper that says that an evil data center is, right, using up all the community's water. And I'm not saying that flippantly. It is an issue, and we've got to make sure that we track it. So pretty straightforward. There's total site water use, and then total source water use. And site water use, you could almost divide it up. And in fact, if you were to dig into the water usage effectiveness ratio, which is the amount of water divided by your power, it starts getting into, well, are you using potable water, reclaimed water, et cetera, which, makes a difference. Obviously, we give the example of, in Ashburn or Loudoun County, where they have the reclaimed water that a lot of the data centers use, which is great, way better than, drawing it from the Potomac or potable water or what have you. So in any event, total site water use is important, and probably would be the first thing that you want to report. And then you can wrap that into a ratio, so you can start comparing it against different size data centers. And of course, depending on your region, it's your water use is going to be different. Now, total source water use is where, if you have electricity generation, uses a tremendous amount of water. So understanding that is also good, and that's probably not a super easy metric to get. You might be able to get it from a utility provider, but now you can start making decisions, because you're going to take into consideration, okay, what I need to use water to make my data center more efficient, use less electricity, which reduces my carbon impact, right? And also, if I use water for evaporative cooling, my water use at the power plant's great. But maybe you hit a time where the location of the data center starts to be water stressed. Well, then what do? You say, well, you know what? I'm gonna forego the energy efficiency that I get, and maybe let water usage at the power plant use more, because maybe the power plant's not in a specifically water stressed area or something like that. So anyways, all this does is give you visibility into that data, so that the operators can start making smarter decisions. And this last one is a leading one. So, just like carbon, we would expect that understanding how much water is used in the production of the stuff that we buy is going to be. So we kind of, you can call this scope 3 water, so to speak. But that is still early days for folks to report on that. Okay.
I have a question, if you don't mind, Rob. So at the beginning, you were talking about reclaimed water and, let's say, non-potable water. How do you reconcile that? Do you have two different meters? Hello? Can you hear me, guys?
We hear you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So we lost Rob.
Looks like he's saying 1 second. So I think his maybe his AirPods or something, or earphones. Yeah. We still can't hear you. Yeah.
Well, my question crashed everything.
It was such a good question. Rob, one trick you could try is actually just dialing in on your phone as well. But
also, you can hear us.
All right. How's now? Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. It's a little soft, but we can hear you.
Fashion on the computer. Okay, great. So I heard you cut off right at the beginning, Cosmo. So potable water versus reclaimed water.
Yeah. So how do you reconcile those two kind of waters, the quality of waters in this metric? Do you have two different metrics?
Yeah, it's not so at this stage it's not addressed in this total site water usage. That's just everything. The details of WUE does have it. They have I can't remember the exact thing, but they have like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, depending on how you report things. And I think you can differentiate it. So to be honest, however WUE sets the standards on dividing up the type of water that you use would probably be ideal to roll into how you might report total site water usage.
Another question, very quick. This is down the road, but we are working on the possibility to reuse the heat to actually generate fresh water out of the seawater. Would you factor that in? So becoming water positive, essentially.
So that's interesting. If I look at the definition, this is total withdrawals, evaporation, and something else. Let me. Yeah. So definition is water withdrawals, evaporation, and discharge. This would be a negative number.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Interesting.
Well.
And
then. So it gets a little because you still use water from the sea, right? But
yeah, so an important part of these metrics, and you see it described in especially the energy reuse metric is putting the boundaries around the data center, right? And so my guess is that energy reuse, like if you have a thing that uses hot water to make fresh water out of seawater, that's likely outside the bounds of the data center, and all the data center doing is exporting water and exporting hot energy in the form of hot water and importing fresh water, and then that other thing is measured another way.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a non-answer, but
And
yeah,
again,
it's not easy, right?
we are not there yet, but
Yeah. Well, I always say, right, if this stuff was super easy, it'd already be done already, right? So, cool. Any other questions on water? All right. And
Oh, sorry. One question. One more comment, just for consideration in the future. I'm not the expert by any means at our company, but Meta announced earlier this year a water positive goal for our operational footprint, and a lot of how we're achieving that is through investing in almost like a parallel to carbon offset projects, water restoration projects. Just something to consider in the future as other hyperscalers adopt, or data center operators adopt similar practices.
yeah, and something that we did not, I guess, specifically attack on this and these metrics is, what should be maybe done at the corporate level versus, okay, this is a specific data center metric, and that might be one of those categories, right? Okay, my data centers do this, but you know what? At the corporate level, we're offsetting that by doing these other things, right?
Absolutely.
But
There's definitely a differentiation between what's happening at like the facility versus the corporate. I do think that there's a concerted effort to try to do projects that are within the same watershed, but I think you're right. It is kind of a corporate's decision whether it's sort of in region or out of region.
It's super interesting because we, to be honest, we're all smart and all, but we hadn't really thought of the water positive aspect when we were creating these metrics. So, that's an interesting thought from both of you guys. So, all right, cool, thank you. All right, so waste. So this is, kind of as we think of all the good circular economy stuff. Some people might be doing this. It might not be hard, but we did put it in the advanced because getting your arms around all the waste that a data center generates from construction through end of life, and then how you measure that as you go along. And again, we didn't go all in and figure out, okay, during construction you report it like this, and during operations you report it like this. We just said, hey, total waste generated, and it makes sense in tons. And once you know what you're generating, then then know where does it go? Does it go to the landfill, and does it go to recycling? And then the last one would be and I think we screwed up. This says I've got to fix the PowerPoint. This is a ratio. Waste diversion rate would be obviously the amount of waste diverted to diverted from a landfill. I see recycled kind of over the waste generated. And you can imagine just for people to track this, hopefully, hey, what's your recycling program when new servers come into your facility and you have all the cardboard? That's an easy one. And there's all sorts of examples. And then I know Meta, you guys are doing an awesome job getting second life out of your IT equipment, right? Through companies like IT Renew and stuff. So that's all, kind of encompassed here.
Is tons really the right units to use here? Because not all waste is equal.
I think that's a fair debatable item. It could be all depending on the size that you're doing. But yeah, that's a fair comment.
I'm hard drive biased, and that's an area where tons just doesn't make sense when you're trying to recover rare earth metals, that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. At that level. Good point. Yeah. All right. Don't ask me a ton of questions on this as I'm going to just open up with that. So as we looked at land and biodiversity, we had on our kind of work group to look at metrics, we had folks from non-data center industry. And so we have, you can imagine people at Schneider that are involved in mining, right? And so there, land, from a sustainability perspective, land is a big deal, right? Because you're ripping up the earth and you're doing stuff like that. In the data center, not as big of a deal. It's a building sitting, it's a reasonably small building and doesn't take up a ton of land relative to industries like that. But it does have an impact. And then the other thing is, well, what about the impact upstream in the supply chain, right? And so mean species abundance is kind of a biodiversity sort of metric that's being developed. And we put this in leading. There's still a lot of work to be done in this area, but you can imagine is in site selection, site selection, what's the impact of the data center? Hey, maybe I'll go ahead and use a retrofit site because I'm disturbing less land. Or what am I doing when I put in a facility to ensure that the natural habitat can still move around the way it's always moved around, right? Maybe I put a bridge over something and do that. So this is a whole area under development that does apply to a lot of industries, and we kind of wanted to at least bookmark this category because we do expect it to probably mature in the coming years. And it came from, this, it's being developed out of France, this particular thing. So, we might go a year and a half from now and find out that, there's these other two metrics that might be more appropriate here. But to at least to start off with, we wanted to kind of get this out there and see what happens. So no questions on that one. Right? I told you everything I know. That's it, pretty much. So our hope is that it's it's a great starting point in to making kind of a standard set. Things that came through my mind as we were going through this are questions. Hey, what about we had debated a little bit. What about the loading of the data center? What if I build a data center and it stays 10% loaded? How do we measure that? Should that be a metric that we report? And potentially yes. And I wouldn't say it's not, but theoretically that the results of that might fall out on scope 3 carbon, and even if you go scope 3 carbon intensity towards your data center and things like that. So, and then so that was kind of our thoughts there on how well loaded is the facility, how well loaded is the IT equipment. But
when you say loaded, do you mean like the utilization or like the total compute and storage in a certain region?
So from my putting the facility hat on, it would be I've got a 10 megawatt data center that's loaded to 2 megawatt. Putting an IT hat on, it would be server utilization or gotcha. Storage, things like that. And I know there's a whole host of things that you can measure on the IT side, from utilization to, power per networking port and things like that, which obviously are not covered here, but might provide useful as you start to get into, the IT aspect.
As a comment, it's a fantastic white paper. I read it before. I think
you're not just saying that. You're not just saying it, are you?
No. I think that really covers a lot of bases that were absolutely needed. It's a fantastic starting point. As a further, let's say, layer, or as a further dimension to add to all this sustainability, what is your thought about the connection of that specific data center in the rest of the industrial and natural environment? Meaning, assuming that you are water positive, or assuming that, as you were saying, you regen your heat. If you are in the middle of the desert, there's nothing around you, or you are not connected to anything else. It's what do you do with those resources? While if you really want to go the extra step, you need something else to use what you generate, right?
Yeah, that's so. I would imagine, right? So let's you fast forward and you say a lot more data centers are reporting on energy reuse, right? ERE. and maybe a lot more data centers are reporting on water positive. Now, you can only report on those if that stuff is going to something that can be used, right?
So,
right. And then, so maybe that drives people to really look at their, I mean, there's so many factors that go in site selection for data center, but, it's another factor to when. Yeah.
Quick question on utilization. How do we measure utilization? Is that the denominator? I'm thinking of things like use of ARM processors and stuff where is the denominator IOPS? Is it storage? Is it, that to me, that's just a really big, tough question. Maybe you have an answer.
And that's why we didn't put it in the list. It's, again, it's outside of obviously our domain of expertise, but, and it all depends on the workload that you're doing, right? Are you doing a heavy storage, heavy compute, heavy networking application? And so your metrics of success are, so it's a tough one. And that's why that one hasn't been solved, because that's hard. To have a standard, to have one number for everybody, right? Good.
Any more questions for Rob and the team before we wrap up this part of the agenda? Thank you so much, Rob. Very informative and super useful for the discussions we've been having.
Yeah, good. And we're open to constructive feedback. Already the comments that you had were great. So it's good to talk to a group like this.
Well, I think something that the way that you displayed the information in the presentation, which I thought was great, is a lot of these metrics have been developed. There are standards out there for them. Yeah. You called out the ISO standards and other academic institutions that are working on these metrics. That's very much the sort of philosophy we've been trying to have here as well, right? Like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If we can just point to these great resources and papers that have consolidated them in such a concise way, like this paper. Where I'm going with this is, we would love to be able to point to this paper as we continue developing what this OCP tenet on sustainability and circularity could look like. Like, hey, if you want to contribute something to OCP and you want to show how you're demonstrating this metric, if you're a data center operator or you're developing a technology that's really going to move the needle on one of these metrics, like, here's the paper. I'm curious what your appetite is for that. I don't know how these things work. I haven't sat on the incubation community before, but anyways, that's where my mind is heading as you were walking through this.
Yeah. So as for as you know, all the information and the metrics that we are pointing to, or just they already exist. It's nothing, there's nothing new invented there. Just the ones that we selected, we just thought would be useful for the industry overall, and the way we categorized them is hopefully a useful way to bucket them. And that's all. It's a public white paper. That's all fine. The mechanics of this particular paper and putting it through the process of OCP donation and stuff, that's a marketing question, which I'll defer to somebody else. But definitely we would hope that you guys could springboard off of this and take it further. It's, absolutely.
In other groups, I've seen papers like that posted as a contribution, and actually on the OCP page. So I think there is a process for that. If you want, Jordan, if you want to explore that, maybe Arcana or somebody could answer that for you.
Sure.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, there's definitely a process. So I can say there's definitely a process for white paper contribution that gets reviewed within the group and then goes to review by the IC, and then it becomes a formal contribution and is visible externally under the OCP brand. So that could be a good thing. Yeah.
Right.
No, I just wanted to comment, Jordan. I agree with you. There's a lot of existing metrics, but I think that one of the big value of this white paper is that maybe there are too many. metrics. So you have to select which one would you want to use. And this white paper at least starts the discussion, say, hey, I picked these ones because this, and that.
Yeah, what I could add to that is we're going to discuss the survey we've been doing of members and how members could look towards the OCP for help with sustainability. But already early results are saying that the members are looking for guidance on best practices and maybe some early indication of what a good standard might be to go by. So, you know, in that vein, this white paper could help people pick through the millions of data points out, well, the large number of data points out there, and, you know, bring some expertise to help them maybe shorten their journey or get them started on a journey. And that's a valuable contribution, I think.
To make it simple, I think.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there's two goals. One is to help people because everybody's looking for a single, and we run into this in security. There's so much out there, and an OCP gives us a lens. And the second is some kind of motivation. And I don't have an answer for the second part.
Yeah, the second part is a good one, and we have been working on that as well. When it comes to heat reuse, the monetization of some of these activities. Can you put a dollar value on some of these things? It could be either positive or negative, but can you tell me?
I think that falls in with metrics. I mean,
it does.
I think one of the things here is to create a general purpose framework for people to share the metrics that they can and not worry about the details too much.
It does. It would be interesting. It's almost impossible, but dreaming, it would be interesting having, beside the kilowatt hours and tons, and a column with the dollar sign, say, hey, this is 1,000 ton equals $150. I'm just guessing, but it's almost impossible because it's so localized that how can you do that?
Well, I think it comes into the microservices kind of thing, where if you're providing a service of some kind, you can put a price on it for somebody to use it. I mean, a lot of the stuff we do is very fine-grained.
The other thing that might be helpful, and I'll pull again from experience in the security group, is the security requirements help drive conversations between vendors and customers. And if we come up with a document that starts being used in the industry, and say a CSP comes to a vendor and says, hey, have you done this OCP stuff? Then suddenly they get very interested and they get involved, they get motivated. If we could have that type of document that becomes a parlance in the industry, I think that might be just asking the questions, having the right questions, let alone the metrics, is important and can help us.
I think that's a really excellent point, Ari, especially because, you know, for many of the metrics that were shown, they're sort of within your four walls. You can measure them. I mean, it obviously takes a level of investment, but you can measure them. I think where a huge challenge, which, you know, Rob also spoke to, is the scope 3 aspect and the supply chain aspect. And that's where we're in a very unique position here within OCP, because a lot of our suppliers are in the community. And if we could align on what is like a standard ask, or what are the things we'd like to see from these various vendors, I think that would be a really interesting thing to also get alignment on.
Yeah, and there is, and I'll put our Andrea on the spot here, right? So just with regards to how Schneider, we have something we call a PEP, product environmental profile, that we use to communicate the product's carbon use, you know, over its lifetime, blah, 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 blah. I think, and then we use a life cycle assessment to get there, and I just learned that. So I think there's international standards that are starting to come out on how companies should be reporting the embedded carbon and stuff, which I think should be a requirement for you know, OCP product submissions. But Andrea, I don't know if you can talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, there are standards. GHG protocol really lays out how we're supposed to be calculating and attributing those emissions. I think I apologize. I think I missed the first part of the question too. Sorry.
Oh, Schneider, we use these things called PEPs, product environmental profile, but is that internal? Is there external standard on how you communicate that?
Yeah, so I mean there are standards for how to conduct an LCA, and there are underlying methodologies for conducting an LCA, and that's the basis for our PEPs. Our PEPs are basically environmental product disclosure, EPDs, and so yeah, there definitely are rules and formats for doing that, and we abide by those, and those are publicly available as well.
Yeah, so just a little history. That was actually where this particular work stream started, is with specifically life cycle assessments. Are there product category rules that govern some of the equipment and the technologies that are within OCP? There is, and there's also some in development. So a couple of the members here are contributing to the development of those, which is great. And yeah, I think, life cycle assessments, I think we would love for that to become the norm with each contribution. And that all sort of, I think, ties back into this whole tenant conversation. Should it just be required that you need to show something equivalent to the PEPs that Schneider produces, something equivalent if you're going to contribute to OCP? It'll take some socialization to get there, but that would be, I think, a great outcome. All right, I know we're just at time. Thank you so much to the Schneider team for presenting. Great paper. Are you able to share that PowerPoint, or is the white paper, kind of the main public product that your team likes to share?
Yes, the white paper is the main public one. This particular PowerPoint, not yet, probably later. So I'll ask the marketing team on on that. So,
and we would love to follow up if possible on whether Schneider would be open to contributing that white paper. It would still be under Schneider's, obviously authorship, but
submission,
just to make it sort of something that we can more directly point to.
And I just wanted to add that, once we have a formal contribution, we already have a machinery to make that contribution public and support it. So looking back to the comment around, if we have such a paper, how does it become something that people use? And so that requires effort to make it available, help people understand the value of it, encourage them to look at it, and maybe even some sort of specific outreach around it if we think it's that important. And so within the OCP, we have all those mechanisms we could apply to it.
And then Kevin, I'm sorry we did not get to your update on talking to the compute group. I believe you were going to reach out to. Is there any 1 to 2 minute update you want to share, or we can also punt it to next time?
That was me you were talking to?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple of people. I had a long chat with Steve Neumann, who was on the last call, I think, or with previous one. So one of the things is trying to get metrics on how software runs. So if we know how software runs and what its requirements are, moving it around to get the most efficiency and lowest costs and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of folds together. If you want to do high performance computing, it's the same as doing high efficiency computing. You're just trying to optimize one metric over another. So we're kind of looking at sort of different aspects. I mean, somebody mentioned security. There's a thing where a lot of security is done with offload engines. So if your software is doing a lot of security stuff, it might be cheaper in power to offload it to somebody's engine to save on power and money. So those kind of things.
Gotcha. Yeah, maybe we can punt this topic to next time, just being respectful of everyone's time. But I would love to dig in a little bit more to this topic. So thanks for reaching out to Steve.
Yeah, if people just connect with me on LinkedIn and we can have chats there. I'm usually on LinkedIn.
Sure. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, bye.